Here's something that should stop you cold. The U.S. military officially tried to retire this weapon. Twice. They funded the replacements, built the hardware, ran the tests. The first replacement exploded on its operators. The second became the official replaced it, but soldiers kept reaching for the original anyway. And today, in 2026, the weapon the Pentagon declared obsolete is being manufactured by the thousands and shipped into an active war zone. So what does a 66-year-old disposable tube know that the entire U.S. procurement system doesn't? To understand that, you have to understand the problem it was born to solve, and the one night in Vietnam that almost ended it forever. The M20 Super Bazooka. 14 pounds, 5 feet long, 2 men minimum, a gunner and a loader who had to coordinate under fire while someone was actively trying to kill them. It worked, but war was changing. By the late 1950s, Army planners wanted something radical. One man, one shot, no assembly, no partner. Fire it and drop the tube. Engineers at Redstone Arsenal answered in 1959. A telescoping fiberglass tube that stored the round, aimed the weapon, and armed itself on extension. Sights snapped up automatically. Nothing to assemble, nothing to maintain. Under 6 pounds. The M72 light anti-tank weapon entered service in 1963. Simple, light, disposable. And 3 years later, it walked into the worst possible test. 11 Soviet-built PT-76 tanks came out of the tree line in the dark. The defenders had 100 M72 LAWs. Enough, on paper, to stop armor that size several times over. Men pulled triggers and heard nothing. They grabbed the next tube, nothing again. The rockets that did fire struck tank steel and failed to detonate. The tanks kept advancing. The investigation revealed a brutal irony. The armor had driven in close, inside the weapon's minimum arming distance. The warheads never had enough travel to arm before impact. They hit Soviet steel and did nothing. The Army fixed the fuses, recalled the inventory, re-stenciled the corrected tubes. But the institutional damage was permanent. In after-action reports, in mess hall conversations, in the memory of every soldier who had cycled through dead tube after dead tube, the M72 became the rocket that couldn't stop armor. That reputation was real. It was also incomplete. Every day across Vietnam, the law was being pointed at something else entirely. Bunkers, machine gun nests with timber overhead cover, fortified rooms, concrete walls. Against those targets, it was devastating. During the Battle of Hue, street fighting through a city of temples and walls 2 feet thick, it punched through structures that absorbed rifle fire without slowing down. Marines credited it with clearing positions that couldn't be flanked, couldn't be suppressed, couldn't be taken any other way. The weapon that couldn't stop tanks was stopping everything else. But the Army had already made up its mind. Better range, modern fusing, purpose-built for Soviet armor. The program moved forward, hardware was built, and then in 1982, it collapsed. The Viper could kill the operator. Under certain conditions, the rocket detonated on launch. Congress canceled the program. Hundreds of millions of dollars gone. So the Army went shopping. They selected the AT-4, Swedish-designed, heavier, more capable, and declared it the official successor. The M72 was formally marked surplus. The transition looked complete. Then someone looked at the weight. That difference doesn't sound decisive until you're building a combat load in 115-degree heat. A soldier carrying an AT-4 has 1 rocket. Carrying LAWs, he has 2 or 3 for the same weight. Against Soviet tank columns rolling across open plains, the AT-4's superior penetration makes the trade obvious. Against an enemy moving on foot, hiding in buildings, fortifying rooms, which describes every war American soldiers would actually fight for the next 4 decades. The math inverted completely. Nobody reversed the retirement order. Nobody had to. The tubes kept accumulating in armories. And then Fallujah arrived. The largest urban battle American forces had fought since Hue. 12,000 Marines and soldiers, house to house, against an enemy that had spent months converting an entire city into a killing ground. Holes punched between buildings so fighters could move without touching the street. Booby-trapped doors. Interlocking fields of fire covering every approach. The buildings were the threat. The walls were the weapon. And the only answer that fit the weight, the geometry, and the pace of a 12-hour house-clearing rotation was a rocket small enough to sling over a shoulder and forget, until it was needed. The M72 came out of storage, not because the Army changed its mind, because the battlefield did. Newer variants had already been redesigned for exactly this mission: blast effect against structures, not armor penetration. The warhead that failed against tanks at Langvay had been rebuilt for the war being fought right now. Army assessments from Afghanistan in 2010 were unambiguous: best balance of weight to combat effectiveness in the inventory. The procurement system declared it obsolete. The battlefield kept choosing it. Today's M72 is not the tube from 1963. The silhouette is the same. Everything inside has been rebuilt. The M72A9 carries a penetrating delay fuse. It goes through the wall before detonating inside. Fire from enclosure variants eliminate the backblast danger that once required operators to be outside. Production lines in Norway and Arizona haven't stopped. Canada sent 4,500 to Ukraine. Norway donated 5,000 from reserve stocks. A weapon declared obsolete against Soviet armor in the 1980s is now being fired at Russian-built tanks and fortified trenches. In a war that, in its static front lines and entrenched positions, sometimes looks closer to 1917 than anything Cold War planners imagined. 2 replacement programs. Decades of surplus status. Still running. The Pentagon kept building for the war it expected. Soldiers kept choosing what worked in the war they had. The engineers at Redstone Arsenal asked a simple question in 1959. How do you give every soldier in the squad a rocket he can actually carry? They answered it with 6 pounds of fiberglass and rocket science. 66 years later, no one has answered it better. The Pentagon tried to replace it twice. The battlefield never agreed. Here's a breakdown of the 4 targeted changes made. Men pulled triggers and heard nothing. They grabbed the next tube. Nothing again. The rockets that did fire struck tank steel and failed to detonate. The tanks kept advancing. The viewer feels the desperation, not just the outcome. The weapon that couldn't stop tanks was stopping everything else, and the procurement system declared it obsolete. The battlefield kept choosing it. Both short, punchy, repeatable. The Pentagon tried to replace it twice. The battlefield never agreed. Directly answers the opening question in one sentence.